Hey everybody, welcome back to the next installment of What's Up With My Rig Today. I've got some real big changes planned, so I wanted to do one more update with how I've been running it the last few months before I make the next big changes. Hopefully this will give you some ideas on how to improve your rig. First of all, let's talk about the body. Take a look here. This is a skid plate that I made from a carbon fiber roof panel, which if it's not a black carbon fiber roof panel, then it's actually fiberglass. There's no such thing as white carbon. This was originally a silver body panel that I painted orange, and you can see it's been rubbed down, and underneath it's fiberglass. It's not actually carbon. And I wanted to run a lighter top panel. So this is the original Lexan Capra panel that I chopped narrower. But I was getting a lot of damage up here, so the reason why I run Lexan is because it's about half the weight of a carbon and especially much lighter than a fiberglass body panel. So I wanted to keep the light weight of Lexan, but I needed some protection up here. So I chopped out this little piece here, and as you can see, I spent a lot of time on my lid. This kind of looks like a light bar, not really. It's not really a aesthetic thing. It's really mostly for protection. If I were to run this again, I'd probably sculpt it a little better, make it look nicer. But that's what this weird plate here is. It's just a rooftop skid plate. Now, if you take a look at my hood, I made some mistakes painting it, and the paint didn't stick very well. So I'm gonna redo this at some point. And also, I built this cool front bumper. It's a carbon fiber tube. It's the same rail diameter as the rest of the Capra rails. And it worked pretty well, but honestly, I went through a couple of them. They actually got smashed and split. The way this works is I have a slit in the back, and the hood plugs into it. Well, that leaves a kind of a sharp stress riser, so you can see my hood is cracked on both sides. It's still plugged in. I'll just pop it out. So here was the concept. It plugs into this slit on the back, but that slit, of course, is a weak spot, and this is the last one that was on there. This thing broke in every direction. I built a replacement. It also cracked. So the problem is this sticks out so far that it runs into things. Here's a typical picture of what I run into all the time. So a lot of cars now have their hoods back behind the front axle. And with this Capra body, I don't really want to chop my hood clear back to here. I think it would look weird. So I'm going to consider a different body altogether. I absolutely love this Capra body. I love the look. My first crawler was a Capra, and I just think it looks really cool. I love the rail design, but it's probably time to move on to something else. High-performance crawlers have moved on. There's a new profile out there. If you look at what Mason Hill at Lawless RC is doing, and also Matt Solomon at Unknown RC, those guys have kind of a new profile that I find really appealing. Basically, the whole car is just a real thin rail, and then up at the front here you have all your motor and business. There's no body on it. You really just have the chassis rails with a tiny hood feature on the front here. This layout is all about performance, and I really think it's cool. So sadly, I'm probably going to retire the Capra look and move on to one of these newer looking, crazy low profile chassis and body designs. Sorry, little buddy, you did great while you were there. Having said that, I might try to incorporate this body. This is a Chevy El Camino. I've always been obsessed with 4x4 El Caminos. I don't know why. It's a pretty stupid vehicle, but people used to jack these up on, I don't know, Toyota 4Runner chassis probably. I always thought this was a pretty cool concept. An El Camino that's a jacked up 4x4. So I haven't gotten around to painting this, but this might be my body. Underneath, I'll still have that super slim chassis, and then I'll leave myself the option to put this body on or off, depending on my mood, but I got to get around to painting this. This is HPI racing. I think it could be really interesting. So let me take off the body and we'll look at some stuff underneath. I've been holding my body down with these hair bands. These are not shock modifiers like you might think. This just holds my body down because I couldn't think of a better way to do it. I really hate drilling a hole and having body clips, so I just use these hair bands, which honestly is not my favorite idea, but I just never got around to making something better. But if I go to a bodiless design, that'll solve that problem. One thing to notice is that in the rear here, I've got my rear links and my rear shocks and the hinge for the chassis all on this one pivot. It's really super clean, but it does limit me a little bit in my flexibility of shock placement and also a little bit the body placement. So I may have to break up these mounting points, the links and the shocks, so I can better tune the suspension performance independently. All right, Capra, this may or may not be the last time we see this. One thing that I've done is I've rerouted the wires on my battery so they come off naturally towards the connector. And I've did a whole video on that you can watch here that shows how I rerouted the wires and also talks about the marine grade super thick 3-to-1 adhesive shrink wrap that I put all my batteries in. It's much thicker and gives a lot of protection to the battery. Be sure to watch this video on battery protection. The other thing I usually do is I have this carbon plate velcroed underneath here, and I do that because I found that when I was upside down, these body rails were hitting the battery and denting it. So I have this protector that keeps the battery safe. This front edge was getting dented, which I have in a lot of my batteries. This one's not so bad. Now I did test a low profile servo in the front, and 2 of them immediately failed in the same week. So I went back to a full-size servo in the front, haven't had a single problem. I do run a small servo in the rear. I've had great luck with a low profile servo in the rear because I think the wheels just don't get bound up as much and it's a little bit lighter weight in the rear and they just don't get stuck. But these front wheels, if they get bound up in the slightest, you will cook a low profile servo almost immediately. So many people have had that experience. I don't know anybody that's really solved it yet, so I went back to a full size. This is a Reefs 888. This is probably one of the best servos you can buy on the market. One of the big changes I'm going to make to this is a new front axle. I have been running a Vanquish Capra front axle with the offset pumpkin. Absolutely love this axle, but it's becoming harder and harder to find them and to get parts for them. I suspect that Vanquish may be discontinuing this axle. Don't know that for sure, but based on what I'm observing, this is really hard to get. So I'm going to switch to a deluxe axle because you can get a wider knuckle position. I want narrow kingpin angle in the front for higher scrub, but I want a wider kingpin in the rear for less scrub. That's just my preference. High scrub in the front, low scrub in the rear, and I did do a video explaining how scrub works if you're interested in that. Also, I've got my 2nd generation weight hangers installed. If you take a look at these now mount directly to the lower 2 Capra portal cover bolts. Before I was mounting to these deluxe hanger locations, and there's nothing wrong with that, but mounting them down here is more flexible for people. You don't have to buy this cover. You can just mount it on existing bolt hole locations. And this weight is pushed down about 10% lower than the 1st generation. And I've got a whole video explaining that new hanger as well. Another thing I've done is I found a 55 by 25 carbon tube. This was on Amazon, and it's only 1 millimeter thick. A lot of times these off-the-shelf tubes are much thicker. And what I did is I cut a section out, cut out the bottom, and I'm going to make a new bridge right here. So this current bridge was 3 pieces glued together, kind of a pain to make. Works awesome, but I need this bridge for my bearing carrier. So now I have this 1-piece bridge that's going to fit right in here. 2 screws from the side. It's going to be simpler and cleaner. It's probably not going to work any better, but I think it's a really nice touch. And when I saw that they had a 55 millimeter wide tube that perfectly matches my chassis, I just couldn't resist adding this on. Also, I've had cut another chassis. So I always get questions, what chassis is that? It's my own chassis, and I designed it and had it cut myself. This new chassis, I went to 2.5 millimeter thickness over 2 millimeters. I never had a problem with this 2 millimeters, but I worry a little bit about crashworthiness. So it's a pretty small weight gain, but I went to 2.5 rail thickness instead of 2. And I kind of fine-tuned some of my mounting holes a little bit. Gave myself a few more link mounting options, and I'm pretty stoked to try this. As I was saying earlier, I've given myself more shock mounting positions in the rear, so I won't have just one option any longer. I can mount my shocks and links in a couple different options for a little bit more flexibility in tuning. Another thing I did is I added some protection to my differential. And what I did is I found this camera tripod extension, and it happened to be exactly the right diameter, and it's a real thin 1 millimeter thick. And so I think this was maybe 20 bucks. What I did is I cut off a small section, dremeled out about 90 degrees of it, and that left me with a semicircle half moon shape that I just taped on the outside. And I think you can see this has really protected the plastic pumpkin underneath. In fact, it's probably time to put a new one on because, wow, that's got a lot more wear than I thought. It's also been knocked crooked. It's supposed to be straight like this, so yeah, it's almost fallen off as well. Yeah, so this worked great, stayed on, and has really protected having to replace my pumpkin. Yes, this does take up about 1 millimeter of ground clearance, and this carbon may not be as slick as printed plastic, but it is pretty slick. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this innovation. Cost almost nothing. I can make dozens and dozens of them very fast and easy, so that's a protection plate. Also pretty happy with how my lead-in ramp and other protection plate is going. If you're a designer out there, you're probably cringing at my non-matching surfaces. Oh yeah, I just remembered. This lead-in ramp that I made, which is a quarter circle, is made out of the same tube. So I have my servo protected, and I have this lead-in ramp. You can see there's quite a few scratches on that lead-in ramp, so it's definitely effective. And there are no scratches above, let's say, the top 5 or 6 millimeters, so I know I'm not getting rock strikes above that. This lead-in ramp seems to be working out great. Quite a bit of wear on the bottom of my axle here. Not enough to wear through or be a problem. Looking good overall. Many of you probably saw my video on the ultralight rear steering link right here. And you'll notice it's not installed on this. That's because I lost it. I think I unscrewed the center section and set the titanium end pieces aside, and then I think they all just got reshuffled into my stock because I could never find that ultralight steering link that I made again. I need to go back and find the parts and reassemble it. I just haven't gotten around to it. A lot of you watched that video, and we had a great conversation about titanium, steel, aluminum, plastic, and how to design an ultralight steering rod. I also switched to smaller 1/8" linkage rods in the rear. These just gave me a little bit more space. They're a tiny bit lighter, but mainly it gives me a little bit more space, a little bit more clearance for the links. Instead of using the larger standard links, I use the smaller diameter. And I got these from Deluxe Fab. They sell the rod ends and this smaller steering rod and this smaller rod. The smaller rods they usually use for steering linkages right here, but they have them in a ton of different lengths, and you can use them for suspension linkage if you're running a short linkage. If you've got a really long link like this, it's probably best to run the thicker. Here's a really small detail that you should pay attention to on your vehicle. Take a look at these two bolts. I had been using these cool colored washers with my bolt heads, but this bolt head right here was rubbing on my linkage. And so what I did is I countersunk just this one bolt head so it's flush, so the link doesn't rub against it. And you should double check your rig to make sure you don't have links rubbing on something you don't want them to. Countersinking carbon is pretty easy. Just buy a cobalt 45-degree bit, and you can change any of your bolts to countersunk if you're careful. This is the countersink bit I used. You just run it in a drill. Be careful you don't go too deep, and you can countersink any of the holes where you might need more clearance. I'll put an Amazon affiliate link in the description if you want to get some carbon fiber tubes for yourself, some square tubes to play with, or a countersink bit. And anytime you use those links, you're sticking it to the man, because Amazon will very kindly share a small commission with the little guy, me. I've also switched from a Holmes 1800 motor to this Three Brothers RC Yellow Jacket 1500 kV motor, and I've been nothing but impressed with this motor. I did a whole video review comparing the two right here, and this motor is smaller and it has a lower kV. However, I found that I actually have the speed that I want, the power that I need, and a much longer runtime. Normally going to a smaller package, all of those things go down, but in this case, it's worked great for me. So I love this motor. I can't recommend it enough. And because I was running 1800 and I went down to 1500, I changed my pinion from 9 up to 10 so I could get back some of that speed that I was losing. Now, normally you would also lose power and runtime with a taller gear. The 10 tooth is a higher gear, a taller gear. But like I said, even though I went up in pinion size, I didn't seem to lose any power. I also didn't lose any speed, and my runtime is way longer. So it's pretty much a win in all categories. Also, I upgraded my radio. I had a Nobl NB4, and I upgraded to the Nobl NB4 Plus. The Plus is significantly better because the screen is much, much brighter. That's probably the main thing. It also has a longer running battery, but all the controls are pretty much the same. This is a magnetic camera mount that I designed myself. It's attached to a carbon plate, and it's attached to this rail system, so I can pop my camera on here and film in the field. I also ordered what I thought was a black wrap for it. It turns out I ordered the purple multicolor wrap, and these wraps don't actually stay on that great anyway. Pardon me for being fancy. I don't really love this purple wrap. I am going to get rid of it, and I'm probably not even going to put the black wrap on because it just kind of falls off and doesn't stay that great. Another thing that's really cool if you're running Nobl is this extra large grip. I have real big hands, and I bought this grip because it has this texture on it. But what I didn't realize is this is actually an extra large size grip. It's an add-on accessory. It doesn't come with the radio. The radio comes with small and large, but this extra one is extra large. Look how it bulges out further down here. That's how you know the difference. This is really, really wide in this direction, and it fits my hand great. I highly recommend trying to find this extra large. Now, just so you know, the way I run rear steer is I have it set up to this thumb wheel right here, and it's set up to 3 clicks. So I'm 0, 50%, 100%, and then goes the other way. So my rear steer is always 0, 50, 100. I've just got 5 clicks, 0, 50, 100, 50, 100 each direction. So this is set up for 5 clicks. I can steer, I can rear steer, and it works out great. This is really my favorite radio. You can switch this to left hand, which is super important to lefties. And I also added on from the Nobl Pro kit this larger diameter wheel. Like I said, I've got big hands, and this is a bigger diameter wheel. Gives me a little bit more sensitivity, I feel. And I put a rubber around the outside because I like the feel of rubber better than foam. And last but not least, I replaced the battery pack with this accessory. This is a USB-C adapter. It just pops on the bottom, so you don't have to carry that battery pack around. You can charge directly and not have to go through the battery pack. And this was a little thin, so I made a reinforcing carbon plate to go on the bottom of it. And this is a really cool feature. It just pops off. I bought it from FlySky, and it's black fiberglass, and I taped it to this black carbon plate for extra strength, but it's much lighter and much cleaner than the battery pack. So that's how I run. I highly recommend this radio. I absolutely love it. Also, I upgraded to a super high-end lanyard or neck strap. This is actually from Peak Designs. It's a camera strap, and it's made from really, really high-quality webbing. My old neck strap, it was starting to get frayed on the edges. It was just a cheap $10 Amazon one. This is much higher quality, much tighter knit, and a much better strap. It's got these really cool adjusters because I can never decide exactly how long I want my strap to be. They're also orange, which is amazing. Then I bought this titanium U-bolt here to attach them to the radio. This is a really clean setup. Now you might be wondering, why didn't I put the U-bolt directly through the radio? Well, I like a little bit of strain relief, so I have this little string in between the radio so that I don't twist or bend or break or put too much stress on the eyelet on the radio. So I have this little extension for stress relief, then the U-bolt, and then the strap. This is a really great system. Again, I'll put links to everything in the description. I think Peak Designs, you probably can only buy it off their website. This is really high-end camera equipment from a San Francisco-based camera accessory company. 2 more things. I designed a new skid. You'll notice there's no bolts exposed on the bottom. I did a whole video here on how I did that. This is working out really great. I've sculpted this out as low as possible, and the motor and the transmission and motor attached from the top with bolts that run this direction. I think I've got a skid here. Yeah, here's a skid that's off. So rather than drilling through the bottom of the skid, I keep this whole bottom nice and smooth. And it's really not a big deal. I just don't like the idea of exposed bolts potentially getting hung up. And it's just much cleaner mentally, if anything, to do it this way. So transmission drops in here, motor sits here, and the transmission is held on right here. And that's all detailed in this video. And last of all, I made some tweaks to my sliders. This is the original slider, and this is the new slider. The original slider had this exposed corner right here that things could get hung up on. So what I did is I filled that in. You can see this area is filled in now, and it actually covers the bolt head. So you put the link on first, and then you put the slider on over the bolt head, so you can't see it. And that gives me a wider sliding surface, and this corner here is now sunk up higher, so rocks roll up and over this a little bit better. Rocks still hit this corner a little bit. It's better than the way it was, but there's probably still room for improvement. But I do like how this is all nested in here and rocks just roll right over the links nice and smoothly. I didn't make any changes to the rear. The other thing I did is I added an edge right here. Let me show you what the original one had. So this is the original skid, and the body sat like this. And the body was just cut flush with the bottom of the skid. But what would happen is that rocks would snag this and lift up on it. Also, actually, I think this sat up here like this. So this front edge right here would get caught and rocks would catch the side of this. So I figured out a really simple solution that I probably should have done from the beginning. I've got this edge right here. Now this body panel sits below this edge. Seems totally obvious. I should have done that from the beginning. So the bottom edge of this body panel is no longer exposed to rocks, so it doesn't get caught when stuff is sliding over this. And like I said, I added material here so this front edge lines up and makes for a smoother transition. I'll probably make another version of this where this leading edge goes up even higher, because this still does sometimes bump. So there's probably room for an even greater lead-in ramp on the front of this. But now that I'm going to try a bodiless design, I may rethink my skids altogether. We'll have to see. That's a detail not yet figured out. So there you have it. This is the last time you'll see my vehicle in this state. Next time, it'll probably look more like this.